The colony on Epsilon 7 was known across the galaxy as Earth's weakest. It was a harsh, dry world, barely able to support life, and the few thousand humans who called it home were seen as rejects, people sent away by the government when no one else wanted them. No fancy weapons, no powerful defenses, just grit and old-fashioned stubbornness. The Zarkon Empire, a ruthless alien force, looked at the colony like it was nothing, a soft target to crush without effort. One dusty morning, huge black warships appeared in the sky, blocking out the twin suns and casting long shadows across the cracked Earth. The colony's warning sirens blared, but there was no time to waste. The attack was about to begin. Among the colonists was Jace, a quiet man with a sharp mind and steady hands. He wasn't a soldier, but years of surviving on this harsh world had made him smart and tough. He had studied old Earth tactics, hunting methods, and guerrilla warfare from broken records and faded books. Jace knew the invaders would underestimate them, and he planned to use that against them. The Zarkon troops stormed down from their ships, armed with advanced weapons, machines, and drones. They expected an easy win. Their mechanical soldiers marched through the settlement, tearing down the simple huts and grabbing whatever supplies they could. But Jace and the colonists didn't run. Instead, when he gave the signal, hidden traps sprung to life. Buried beneath the dust were explosives made from old mining gear, set up carefully over years. Tripwires stretched between jagged rocks triggered sudden blasts. Camouflaged pits filled with sharp spikes caught many invaders off guard. The Zarkon soldiers stumbled, trapped and confused. Then, Jace activated the colony's secret weapon, an energy pulse device built from scavenged parts and powered by rare minerals from the planet. A blast of electromagnetic energy surged through the valley, shutting down the invaders' machines and weapons for precious seconds. The Zarkon troops panicked. Their mechanical soldiers froze and crashed, drones fell from the sky, and their weapons went silent. The colonists charged forward with rusty rifles, mining tools, and fists. Despite their weakness, the colonists fought fiercely, driven by the will to survive. Jace led a group to take over the invaders' landing zone, while others destroyed their supply caches. The invaders' pride shattered in minutes. Within 7 minutes, the Zarkon ships retreated, broken and humiliated. The weakest colony had done what no one thought possible. They had wiped out the invaders in a flash. The moment the Zarkon ships disappeared over the dusty horizon, the colony burst into a strange mixture of celebration and disbelief. For years, everyone had believed they were weak, helpless, and doomed to live as forgotten outcasts on this rough planet. But now, they had proven something different. They had survived, and not just survived. They had defeated a brutal alien force in just 7 minutes. Jace stood among the crowd, breathing hard, his heart pounding like a drum. He wiped dust and sweat from his brow and looked around at the faces of the people he had lived alongside for years. They were battered, bruised, and exhausted. But there was something new in their eyes, a fierce pride, a fire that hadn't been there before. This isn't just luck, Jace thought. It's something else, something we earned. The colony leaders quickly gathered at the makeshift command center, a simple stone building that barely held up against the fierce winds of Epsilon 7. Jace was called in, along with a few others who had helped plan the defenses. Mara, the colony's de facto strategist before Jace stepped up, greeted him with a tired but genuine smile. "You did good out there," she said quietly. "We all did." Jace nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. The Zarkon Empire was powerful, and this attack had been just one wave. If they thought the colony was weak, they wouldn't stop after one defeat. They would come back stronger, with more soldiers and bigger weapons. "We need to prepare," Jace said. "This was just a test. They'll be back." The leaders agreed. The colony couldn't afford to wait. The few scraps of advanced technology they had scavenged from the invaders' wreckage were studied carefully, and the engineers worked day and night to repair and improve their traps and weapons. Every able-bodied colonist was trained, not just in basic combat, but in using the environment to their advantage. The harsh planet, once a curse, was now a weapon. Jace spent hours walking the perimeter of the colony, studying the land like a hunter tracking prey. He knew every rock, every ridge, every hidden crevice that could be used in a fight. The dust storms that had made life miserable were now cover for ambushes. The dry riverbeds could hide explosive charges. The planet's rare minerals could power their energy weapons more efficiently. But it wasn't just about tools and weapons. It was about the people. Jace understood that no matter how many machines or tricks they had, the colony's greatest strength was their spirit, their refusal to give up, even when everything was against them. One evening, as the twin suns set behind the jagged mountains, Jace sat alone on a ridge overlooking the colony. The sky turned a deep orange, fading to purple as night settled in. The air was cool now, and the stars began to twinkle faintly. He thought about the attack, how fast it had happened, how close it came to disaster. If a few traps hadn't worked perfectly, if the energy pulse device hadn't fired at the right moment, the colony might have been wiped out like so many others in the galaxy. But they weren't wiped out. They fought back. They won. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice behind him. Mara had come to join him. "You're thinking too much," she said, sitting down beside him. Jace shrugged. "I can't stop. Not now. We all feel it, but overthinking will kill us. We have to keep moving. Keep improving." She pulled a small device from her pocket, a simple data pad. "Look at this," she said, handing it to him. It showed images taken from the invaders' ships before they left. Huge fleets gathering far away, preparations for a full invasion. Jace's jaw tightened. "So they're serious about this," Mara nodded. "We have maybe 2 months before the next wave hits. We need to be ready." The next weeks were a blur of activity. The colony transformed from a scattered group of survivors into a disciplined community focused on survival and resistance. Schools turned into training grounds. Engineers crafted new weapons and improved old ones. Farmers dug trenches and set traps. Everyone had a role, and everyone trained hard. Jace found himself in a leadership role. It wasn't official. There were no military ranks here, but the colonists trusted him because he had shown they could win. He made plans, taught tactics, and coordinated defense teams. It was exhausting, but it gave him purpose. One night, while walking through the settlement, Jace overheard a conversation that chilled him. 2 colonists were talking about giving up, about surrendering when the invaders returned. They said maybe Earth had forgotten about this place for a reason, that the colony was too weak to fight a real war. Jace stopped and looked at them. "Weak?" he said quietly. "We're not weak. We just haven't had a chance to show what we're made of." The colonists needed hope, and Jace knew he had to be the one to give it. As the days passed, the colony's defenses grew stronger, but the fear of the next attack loomed large. The people who had once felt forgotten now felt watched, hunted. Every strange noise, every shadow in the dark sent hearts racing. Finally, the day came. The sky turned dark as Zarkon warships returned, bigger and more numerous than before, but this time the colony was ready. Jace stood at the front line, his rifle slung over his shoulder and a new energy blade strapped to his side. Around him, colonists manned the improved traps and weapons, eyes sharp and steady. When the invaders landed, they found no easy target. Instead, they faced a fortress built from years of hardship and determination. The battle was fierce and long, unlike the quick raid before. But the colony fought with the fury of people who had nothing left to lose. Jace moved through the chaos, leading charges, rescuing trapped colonists, and striking down enemies with precision. Hours passed, and the tide turned. The invaders faltered, their machines breaking down under relentless attacks and clever traps. By the time the twin suns began to rise, the invaders were in full retreat. The colony had not only survived, they had won again. Jace looked out over the battlefield, smoke rising from the wreckage, and felt a deep pride. The weakest colony was no longer weak. They were a force to be reckoned with. But Jace knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was watching now, and their fight was far from over. The morning after the second battle dawned cold and quiet. The twin suns of Epsilon 7 peeked over the horizon, casting a pale light on the shattered landscape, where the invaders' ships had fallen like dark scars on the dusty ground. The air still smelled of smoke and burning metal, but the colony was alive and stronger than ever. Jace walked through the settlement, his boots crunching on broken debris, eyes scanning the faces of the survivors. People were tired, some limping from wounds, others pale from exhaustion. But there was something new in the way they carried themselves, a mix of relief, pride, and hardened resolve. Mara joined him as he approached the command center. "We did it," she said softly, watching the colony buzz with renewed energy. "We survived the worst they could throw at us." Jace nodded but kept his face serious. "They'll be back. Maybe not soon, but they'll try again." The leaders had gathered inside the command center. The room was filled with maps, broken pieces of alien tech, and scattered data pads. The colony's survival depended on turning what they had learned from the fights into strength for the future. "We have to understand who we're up against," Jace said, tapping on the map. "The Zarkon Empire isn't just another alien threat. They're organized, ruthless, and adaptive. Every battle they lose makes them more dangerous." Mara frowned. "They came here thinking this place was a joke, a weak colony no one cared about. Now they see us as a problem." Jace's jaw tightened. And problems don't get ignored. For days, Jace and the colony's scientists worked to recover data from the invaders' wreckage. Broken drones, shattered weapons, and scorched uniforms were carefully examined. The information was limited, but it revealed one chilling truth. The Zarkon Empire had already crushed many other human colonies before, with brutal efficiency. Epsilon 7 was their first real failure. This knowledge was both terrifying and motivating. It meant the colony wasn't just fighting for itself. It was fighting for the idea that humans could survive against overwhelming odds. Late one evening, Jace met with a small group of colonists in a quiet corner of the settlement. They were the colony's best minds, engineers, and fighters. Among them was Tarek, a tall, wiry man known for his skill with weapons, and Lila, a sharp-witted engineer who had built much of their energy pulse tech. "We need a plan to strike back," Jace said, pacing slowly. "Waiting for them to attack again isn't enough. We have to take the fight to them." Tarek nodded. "They're organized like a machine. If we can disrupt their supply lines or hit their command ships, we can slow them down." Lila added, "I've been working on modifying the pulse device. If we can increase its range and power, maybe we can take out their communications before they even land." Jace looked at each of them, feeling the weight of responsibility. "It's risky. We're still small, still weak in numbers. But if we don't act, they'll come back stronger. We either fight smart or we die waiting." The group agreed to start preparing a strike team, small, fast, and deadly. They would need to gather intelligence, plan carefully, and use every advantage the planet gave them. Meanwhile, the colony's morale began to shift. Stories of their victories spread, and more people who had once doubted them started to believe in their cause. The weak colony was becoming a symbol, not just of survival, but of resistance. But Jace knew the cost was high. Every day, more families buried their dead, and every night he dreamed of the faces lost in battle. The colony had won, yes, but victory came with pain. One night, Jace stood at the edge of the settlement, staring into the dark sky. The stars seemed distant and cold, but beneath them, the planet hummed with life, the stubborn, fierce life of people refusing to give up. Suddenly, a sharp noise behind him made Jace turn. It was Mara, carrying a small satchel. "I found something," she said quietly, handing him a datapad. "Intercepted a transmission from their fleet." Jace's eyes scanned the message, a warning from the Zarkon commanders about a possible human rebellion spreading across nearby systems. It spoke of a secret weapon humans were developing, something powerful enough to challenge the Empire's control. Jace's heart raced. Could it be a chance to end this war? Or was it another trap? The colony's leaders debated fiercely over the next days. Some wanted to strike immediately, riding the momentum of their victories. Others warned caution, fearing the Zarkon's retaliation. Jace pushed for a middle ground. "We don't have the luxury of waiting forever, but we need to be prepared. We'll send a small team to scout the enemy fleet, gather intelligence, find weaknesses. Then we decide." The decision was made, and Jace was chosen to lead the mission. He spent the next week training with his team. Tarek, Lila, and a handful of others who had proven themselves in battle. They learned to move quietly through the rocky terrain, use new weapons, and communicate without detection. On the night of their departure, the colony gathered to see them off. The mood was somber but hopeful. They were sending a piece of themselves into the enemy's lair, but it was a risk they had to take. Jace looked at the faces around him. Friends, neighbors, strangers bound by fate. He promised himself he wouldn't fail them. The team set out just before dawn, moving across the planet's barren surface toward the distant mountains where the Zarkon fleet had been spotted. The journey was hard. The terrain was rough, and the constant fear of discovery kept everyone alert. They traveled by night, resting in small caves during the day. On the fourth night, they reached a ridge overlooking the enemy's hidden base, a massive, heavily guarded station carved into the mountain's side. From here, Jace could see ships docked and troops moving below. The team set up a small observation post, sending encrypted reports back to the colony with every detail. As they watched, Jace realized how vast the enemy's power truly was. Hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, and weapons that dwarfed anything the colony had seen. But he also noticed cracks, disorganization, supply delays, and the invaders' frustration after their failures on Epsilon 7. That night, Jace gathered his team. "We've seen what we're up against, but we've also seen their weaknesses. It's time to strike." The plan was daring. Infiltrate the base, plant explosives on the main power grid, and disrupt the fleet's operations. The mission was dangerous. Failure meant death. Success meant a chance to turn the tide of the war. Under cover of darkness, the team moved silently through tunnels and security patrols. Jace's heart pounded with every step, but he kept his focus sharp. They planted the charges carefully, setting timers to give them enough time to escape. As they retreated, alarms blared. The base was waking up to the attack. The team sprinted through the twisting corridors, dodging guards and automated defenses. Explosions rocked the station behind them, cutting power and throwing the invaders into chaos. When they finally burst outside into the cold night air, the base was already crippled. Ships were stranded on landing pads, soldiers confused and disorganized. Jace looked back once, then led the team toward the safety of the mountains. The mission was a success, but it was only the beginning. As they disappeared into the dark, Jace knew one thing for sure. The colony might be the weakest, But it was no longer defenseless. The war had changed, and so had they. The mountains loomed dark and silent around Jace and his team as they slipped away from the crippled Zarkan base. Their lungs burned from the cold, dry air of Epsilon 7, and every muscle ached from the long trek. But their spirits were high. They had struck a powerful blow against the invaders, and the colony was waiting for their return. Still, Jace knew better than to celebrate too soon. The Zarkons were ruthless and well-equipped. Their retaliation would be swift and merciless. For now, survival was their priority. The group moved cautiously, taking the longest, least expected routes back to the colony. Terek, ever the scout, kept watch ahead while Lila checked the timers on their last explosives, ensuring none were left behind to betray their position. The night was pitch black, with only the faint glow of distant stars illuminating the rocky landscape. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the harsh terrain slowed their progress. Loose stones slid beneath their boots, and hidden crevices threatened to swallow an unsteady footstep. Jace's mind raced, not just with the physical challenges, but the looming threat of the Zarkons discovering their sabotage. "We can't stay exposed out here much longer," Terek whispered, eyes sharp. "They'll send search parties soon." Jace nodded. "We push through. We're almost there." Hours later, just before dawn, the ragged group finally reached the edge of a narrow canyon. Below lay the sprawling colony, its dim lights twinkling like stars against the dark earth. The sight filled Jace with a mixture of relief and determination. But the danger wasn't over. A sudden, sharp noise echoed from the canyon, a low hum that grew steadily louder. Mechanical drones, hunting for signs of their presence. "Ambush!" Jace hissed, pulling his rifle as the team scrambled for cover behind rocky outcrops. The drones swept in, scanning the area with cold red sensors. Lila raised her device, unleashing a pulse that briefly disabled their systems, causing several drones to crash into the canyon walls. The team used the moment to move, but more drones were closing in fast. Terek fired sharply, taking down one drone after another, but their numbers were overwhelming. "We need to split up," Jace shouted. "Terek, take the left ridge. Lila, follow me to the right." They dashed in opposite directions, weaving through rocks and dust clouds. Jace's breath came hard as he zigzagged through narrow paths, the drone sensors still searching. He reached a ledge overlooking the canyon floor and fired a final shot that brought down a pursuing drone. The team regrouped near the canyon's mouth, bruised and breathless but intact. "That was close," Lila said, wiping sweat from her brow. "Too close." Jace gave a grim nod. "They're desperate. They'll try anything to catch us." Back in the colony, the mood was tense. Word of the successful strike spread quickly, but so did the warnings of Zarkon counterattacks. Leaders met daily to strategize, balancing the need to defend the settlement while planning further missions. Jace found himself at the center of it all. His success had made him a natural leader, but the pressure weighed heavily. He couldn't ignore the growing exhaustion on his face or the dark circles beneath his eyes. One evening, Mara approached him in the command center, her voice low. "You're pushing too hard, Jace. You need rest." He shook his head. "There's no time for rest. If we don't stay ahead, we'll lose everything." She gave him a sad smile. "And if you break, we lose our best hope." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alert. A reconnaissance drone spotted far above the colony, moving silently through the sky. Jace's heart sank. The Zarkons were still watching, still hunting. The colony scrambled to prepare. Defensive squads manned the lookout posts, ready to sound alarms. Engineers worked on jamming signals and improving their early warning systems. Over the next week, the colony's defenses were tested repeatedly. Small skirmishes erupted along the borders, each time pushing the colonists to their limits. The invaders were learning, adapting, but so were the humans. Jace led patrols into the wastelands, gathering intelligence and striking at supply lines. Each mission was more dangerous than the last, but with every victory, the colony's confidence grew. Yet, beneath the surface, doubts crept in. Not everyone believed victory was possible. Some whispered that the colony's fight was futile against such a vast empire. Fear and despair lingered like a shadow. One afternoon, Jace found himself in a quiet corner of the settlement, speaking with a young colonist named Myra. She was barely 18, but had fought bravely in the battles. "Do you ever wonder if it's all worth it?" she asked, eyes wide and honest. Jace looked at her, remembering his own fears. "Every day," he admitted, "but I believe we're fighting for something bigger than ourselves. For our future." Mira nodded slowly, a spark of hope lighting her face. As the colony strengthened, a new threat emerged. Reports came in of other human settlements falling to the Zarkons, some wiped out completely. The invaders' reach was vast, and their brutality unmatched. Jace and the leaders realized they couldn't fight alone. They needed allies. Other colonies, human resistance groups scattered across the stars. Sending messages through encrypted channels, the colony reached out, sharing information, strategies, and hope. Slowly, a network of resistance began to form. It was a fragile alliance, built on trust and desperation, but it gave the colonists something they hadn't felt in a long time: a chance. One evening, as the twin suns set behind the mountains, Jace stood once more on the ridge overlooking the colony. The stars above seemed brighter, filled with silent promises. He clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the fight ahead. The Zarkons were powerful, but the colony was no longer weak. They were human. They were survivors. And they would not go quietly into the night. The alliance was fragile, but it was the best hope the colony had. Jace spent long hours communicating with distant settlements, sharing their successes and failures, learning from others' experiences. Every message carried a silent plea. "We're not alone." The network of resistance was growing, small, scattered pockets of humans fighting back, refusing to bow to the Zarkon Empire's rule. It was a dangerous game, but Jace believed that if these pockets could unite, they could become a force strong enough to challenge the Empire itself. Back on Epsilon 7, life settled into a tense routine. The colony worked non-stop, repairing damaged defenses, training new recruits, and preparing for the inevitable next assault. The twin suns rose and set over a land that was no longer just a barren wasteland, but a battlefield where hope and despair clashed every day. One morning, Jace received a coded message from a nearby settlement called New Haven. Their transmission was urgent. Zarkon forces were massing nearby, preparing for a massive strike. Jace called an emergency meeting of the colony's leaders. The room was crowded, the air thick with tension. "We have little time," Jace said, pacing in front of a holographic map displaying troop movements. "If New Haven falls, the Empire's forces will be even closer. We need to help them." Mara, ever pragmatic, frowned. "Our defenses are stretched thin. If we send help, we risk weakening ourselves." Jace met her gaze. "If we don't act, New Haven falls, and then they come for us next." The room was silent. The choice was clear but risky. That night, under the cover of darkness, Jace led a strike team toward New Haven. The journey was long and perilous, moving through hostile terrain and avoiding Zarkon patrols. The team was small but skilled. Engineers, fighters, and scouts who knew how to move quietly and strike hard. As they approached New Haven, the signs of battle were everywhere. Burned-out vehicles, crumbled walls, and distant explosions echoed through the night. Jace's heart pounded. This was no longer just about survival. It was about saving a fellow colony and sending a message to the Empire that humanity wouldn't back down. The team slipped inside New Haven's ruined perimeter, joining the defenders who were exhausted but unbroken. Together, they planned a counterattack. Using the element of surprise, guerrilla tactics, and the terrain, they aimed to hit the Zarkan forces where it hurt most, their supply lines and command centers. The battle that followed was fierce. Explosions lit the night sky, and the air was thick with smoke and the cries of combat. Jace moved through the chaos, coordinating attacks and rallying fighters. Despite the Zarkon's superior numbers and technology, the defenders fought with the same fierce determination Jace had seen before, the will to protect their home and each other. Hours later, as dawn approached, the Zarkon forces began to retreat, their losses heavy. New Haven was saved, for now. But the victory came at a cost. Many fighters were lost, and the colony's defenses were damaged. Back on Epsilon 7, news of the victory spread quickly. The resistance network gained new strength, inspired by the bravery of those who fought against impossible odds. Jace returned home a hero, but the weight of leadership pressed heavily on him. The war was far from over. In the following weeks, the colony continued to build its strength, learning from every battle, every loss. Jace spent nights studying alien tech recovered from New Haven and previous fights, working with engineers to adapt it for their use. One evening, Mara approached him with a grave expression. "We've intercepted another Zarkon transmission," she said, handing over a data pad. "They're planning a full-scale invasion, much bigger than before." Jace's face hardened. "How soon?" "Less than a month." The colony had little time to prepare. Over the next weeks, every colonist worked tirelessly. Defensive walls were reinforced, weapons stockpiled, and training intensified. Jace coordinated with allied colonies, sharing intel and planning joint defenses. The night before the invasion, Jace walked through the colony, stopping to speak with families, fighters, and children alike. He told them what he believed, that they were stronger than they'd ever been, that their fight was not just for survival, but for the future of humanity. When dawn broke, the skies darkened with the massive Zarkon fleet. The battle that followed was unlike any before. For hours, the colony endured wave after wave of attacks, airstrikes, ground troops, and powerful war machines. But this time, the colony was ready. Every trap was set, every weapon fired, every fighter fought with the strength of a people who refused to be broken. Jace led from the front, his voice carrying orders and encouragement. Amidst the chaos, moments of heroism shone brightly. Fighters risking everything to save others, engineers racing to repair damaged defenses, families banding together in hope. As the battle reached its climax, the energy pulse weapons, now more powerful than ever, sent surges of electromagnetic energy that disabled the invaders' machines and communications. The Zarkon forces faltered. With one final push, the colonists drove the invaders back. When the dust settled, the colony stood victorious, battered but unbowed. Jace looked out over the settlement, knowing the fight was far from over, but for the first time, he felt hope that humanity might win. The battle had ended, but the scars it left on the colony ran deep. Smoke still drifted from shattered buildings, the ground was torn by craters, and every face bore the weight of loss. The victory was real, but so was the cost. Jace walked through the settlement, the heavy silence pressing down on him. Families were grieving, medics rushed between makeshift triage centers, and the tired fighters cleaned their weapons, some staring blankly into the fading light. Despite the exhaustion, Jace knew they had to act quickly. The Zarkon Empire was vast and brutal. This battle was only a single front in a much larger war. The colony's survival depended on rebuilding and preparing for what was coming next. Inside the command center, Jace and Mara reviewed the battle reports. The invaders had been pushed back, but their losses had been replaced quickly by reinforcements from deep space. "We held them off," Mara said quietly. "But they're not done. Not by a long shot." Jace nodded. "We've slowed them down, but their fleet is still massive. We need allies, stronger ones." That night, Jace sent out new messages, this time reaching beyond the scattered human colonies. There were rumors of other civilizations, alien worlds oppressed by the Zarkon Empire's expansion. If even a few could be convinced to join the resistance, it might change the war's course. Days passed without reply. The waiting was hard. Jace spent hours scanning the stars, hoping for any sign that help was coming. Then, unexpectedly, the response came. A small fleet of ships, sleek and unlike anything humans had built, arrived near Epsilon 7's orbit. The vessels carried unknown symbols and glowed with unfamiliar energy. They hailed the colony with a message of solidarity, a coalition of alien species who also opposed the Zarkon Empire. Jace felt a spark of hope, like never before. For the first time, they weren't alone in this fight. The alien leaders, strange beings with sharp eyes and calm voices, met with Jace and the colony's council. They offered technology, strategic advice, and fighters ready to stand alongside humans. The coalition was fragile, built on shared desperation, but it was a beginning. Training began immediately. Colonists learned to operate new weapons and vehicles. The alien allies shared knowledge of the Zarkon's tactics and weaknesses. Jace worked closely with their commanders, planning joint operations that could strike deep into enemy territory. Life in the colony changed fast. The simple outpost was becoming a hub of resistance, a beacon for others who refused to surrender. But not everyone welcomed the newcomers. Some colonists feared the aliens, strangers who brought unknown technology and strange customs. Suspicion and mistrust simmered beneath the surface. Jace understood the fear. He'd felt it himself when the first alien ships arrived. But he also saw the bigger picture. Survival required unity. One evening, Mara found him overlooking the colony from a high ridge. "People are scared," she said softly. "Some are talking about leaving." Jace sighed. "I don't blame them. Change is hard, but we can't afford to turn on each other now." She nodded. "We need to build trust." Together they organized meetings, bringing humans and aliens together to share stories, food, and ideas. Slowly, barriers began to fall. Meanwhile, the Coalition's scouts brought urgent news. The Zarkons were preparing a massive assault on a nearby human settlement, a key supply hub that, if lost, would cut off support to Epsilon 7. Jace and the Coalition commanders agreed. They had to stop the attack. The mission was risky. They planned a coordinated strike, with humans and aliens working side by side. Jace led the ground forces while the alien pilots took to the skies. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Explosions rocked the settlement as defenders fought desperately against overwhelming numbers. Jace's team moved through rubble-strewn streets, pushing back the invaders with close-quarters combat and guerrilla tactics. Alien warriors fought alongside humans, their weapons and abilities unlike anything Jace had seen. The combination of human grit and alien technology was powerful. After hours of brutal fighting, the Zarkons were forced to retreat, leaving behind a battlefield littered with wreckage and fallen soldiers. Victory came at a cost, but it was a turning point. The Coalition had proven that together they could challenge the Empire's might. Back at Epsilon 7, the colony celebrated cautiously. There was hope, yes, but also the sober understanding that the war was far from over. Jace looked out at the stars from the command center's balcony. The galaxy was vast and filled with enemies, but also allies. The fight for survival had become a fight for freedom, and Earth's weakest colony was no longer weak. The victory at the supply hub had brought a wave of cautious optimism to Epsilon 7, but Jace knew better than to let hope blind him. The Zarkon Empire was vast, relentless, and far from defeated. Their next move would be bigger, more brutal, and likely unavoidable. In the weeks that followed, the colony and their new alien allies worked tirelessly to strengthen their defenses and deepen their cooperation. Alien technology was integrated into human weapons and vehicles, while human tactics adapted to include the unique abilities of their allies. Despite the advances, tension simmered beneath the surface. Some colonists still struggled to trust the aliens, while others feared their technology might one day be turned against humanity. Jace spent long hours walking among the people, listening, calming fears, and reminding everyone that unity was their only path to survival. One night, as twin moons cast a pale glow over the settlement, Jace met Mara near the training grounds. "There's unrest," she said quietly. "Small fights, heated words. Some want to push the aliens out." Jace sighed. "Fear is natural, but we've seen what happens when we're divided." "We need to do more," Mara said. "Bring everyone together." Together they organized a gathering, a festival of sorts, celebrating the strength of both humans and their new allies. Food, music, and stories were shared under the stars. Barriers began to break down as laughter replaced suspicion. But even as the colony found moments of peace, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Scout ships brought alarming reports. A massive Zarkon fleet was moving through the outer systems, its destination clear: the heart of the human resistance. Jace and the coalition commanders convened an emergency council. The holographic map showed hundreds of ships, their formation tight and deadly. "This is it," Jace said grimly. "They're coming for us all." The colony prepared for a siege unlike any before. Defensive positions were fortified, weapons stockpiled, and evacuation plans made for non-combatants. In the days before the attack, Jace visited families, shared quiet moments with fighters, and steeled himself for what was to come. When the Zarkon fleet appeared in the system, the sky darkened with warships. The twin suns were eclipsed by shadows, and the colony's alarms blared. The battle began with a fury that shook the planet. Energy blasts lit the sky, explosions rocked the ground, and the air was filled with the roar of engines and cries of battle. Jace fought at the forefront, coordinating defense squads and rallying fighters. Alien warriors soared through the skies in their sleek ships, weaving between enemy vessels and striking with precision. The colony's energy pulse weapons, now more powerful and reliable, sent waves of electromagnetic blasts that crippled enemy machines and communications. Despite their strength, the Zarkons pushed hard, their numbers overwhelming. Hours stretched into a day as the battle raged on. The colony's defenses held, but the strain was immense. Supplies ran low, and fighters grew weary. In the heat of battle, a Zarkon command ship broke through the defenses and landed near the colony's center, deploying elite troops. Jace led a rapid response team to intercept them. The fight was brutal, hand-to-hand combat in the colony's streets. Jace moved with fierce determination, fighting not just for survival, but for the future of his people. The elite invaders were skilled and ruthless, but the colony's fighters matched them blow for blow. In the end, the command ship was destroyed, and the invaders were pushed back. As night fell, the battle slowed. Both sides regrouped, battered, and exhausted. Jace stood on a ridge overlooking the colony, the fires of battle casting flickering shadows across the landscape. He knew the fight was far from over, But the colony had survived, stronger, united, and ready for what came next. The dust had barely settled when Jace stood amid the ruins of the colony's central square. Fires still smoldered, and the air was thick with smoke and ash. The long, brutal siege had tested every ounce of strength and willpower in the colony. Countless lives had been lost, yet the colony had endured. Against all odds, the weakest colony had become the fiercest resistance the galaxy had ever seen. Jace felt the weight of that victory heavy on his shoulders. The faces around him told stories of pain, loss, but also of hope and unbroken spirit. Survivors helped the wounded, salvaged what they could, and prepared to rebuild. The war was not over, not by a long shot, but for the first time, they had a glimpse of a future beyond mere survival. Days after the battle, the alien allies sent out a transmission. It was an official declaration. The coalition was expanding, inviting other oppressed planets and species to join the fight against the Zarkon Empire. The galaxy was waking up to the threat, and humanity's example on Epsilon 7 was a rallying cry. Jace met with the colony's leaders and alien commanders in the command center. The room was filled with maps, holographic displays, and tired but determined faces. "We've won a major battle, but the war continues," said Commander Sarah, the leader of the alien contingent. Her voice was calm but firm. "The Zarkon Empire will regroup. They will strike again, but this time they face a united front." Jace nodded. "We've proven that even the weakest can fight back. Now we need to turn that strength into lasting freedom." Mara, standing beside him, added, "The colony will rebuild stronger. We'll train more fighters, improve our defenses, and share our knowledge with our allies." The plan was ambitious. Establish a network of fortified colonies, supply routes protected by combined human and alien forces, and coordinated strikes deep into enemy territory. It was a war of endurance, strategy, and unity. Meanwhile, Jace took time to walk the colony, speaking with families and fighters alike. He listened to stories of sacrifice, resilience, and dreams for a better life. Children who once lived in fear now played in the streets, their laughter a quiet rebellion against the darkness. But Jace also faced his own struggles. The war had changed him, made him harder, sometimes distant. Nights brought restless dreams of battles lost and friends fallen. Yet each morning, he rose to lead, driven by the belief that their fight mattered. One evening, under the light of the twin moons, Mara joined him atop the ridge overlooking the colony. "We're not just survivors anymore," she said softly. "We're builders of a future." Jace looked out at the stars, feeling the vastness of the galaxy around them. "It's just the beginning." The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Colonies, once isolated, now communicated openly, sharing intelligence and resources. Alien technology transformed human weapons and defenses. Joint training programs created new generations of warriors prepared for the harsh realities ahead. Skirmishes continued across the stars, but each one strengthened the coalition's resolve. The Zarkons grew wary of the united resistance. Their arrogance was replaced by caution, and for the first time, whispers of rebellion reached even the highest echelons of their empire. Back on Epsilon 7, the colony became a symbol of hope, defiance, and the power of unity. Visitors came from distant worlds to learn from their example. Jace and Mara worked to build not just a military force, but a community where humans and aliens lived and thrived side by side. Yet challenges remained. Resources were scarce, losses still heavy, and the threat of betrayal ever present. The road to freedom was long and fraught with danger. Then came the intelligence that changed everything. a secret Zarkon superweapon under construction on a distant planet. A device capable of wiping out entire colonies with a single strike. The Coalition planned a daring mission to infiltrate and destroy the weapon before it could be completed. Jace was chosen to lead the assault team. The journey was perilous. The team traveled across hostile space, evading patrols and infiltrating enemy territory. The closer they got, the heavier the silence became, a tension that pressed on their nerves. When they finally reached the target, the team struck with precision and fury. Explosions tore through the enemy base, alarms blared, and fierce combat erupted. Jace fought with everything he had, his training, his courage, and the memories of all who depended on him. In the chaos, they succeeded. The superweapon was destroyed, its threat ended. But the victory came at a cost. Several team members were lost, including some close to Jace. The return to Epsilon 7 was bittersweet. The colony welcomed them as heroes, but the losses were keenly felt. Standing once more on the ridge overlooking the colony, Jace reflected on the journey, from the weakest colony mocked and abandoned to a beacon of resistance and hope. The galaxy was vast, the fight far from over, but humanity had proven its strength. They were no longer the weakest. They were the spark that could light the stars. The war had changed everything. Years after the final destruction of the Zarkon superweapon, Epsilon 7 was no longer a forgotten, barren world. It had become a thriving hub, a symbol of resilience, unity, and the power of hope in the darkest times. The colony that had once been called Earth's weakest was now a beacon to countless other worlds across the galaxy. Jace stood on the same ridge where so many battles had been planned and so many difficult decisions made. The twin suns of Epsilon 7 shone warmly across a landscape transformed. Where once there had been scorched earth and craters, now fields of hardy crops waved gently in the breeze. New buildings, strong and beautiful, dotted the horizon, constructed not just for defense but for life, for community. He looked out over the colony with a quiet pride, but also with a deep sense of responsibility. The victory over the Zarkon Empire had come at a great cost. Friends lost, families broken, sacrifices made. And yet, from that pain had grown something powerful. The alien allies, once strangers and sources of fear, were now partners and friends. Their ships flew alongside human vessels in patrols that protected the colony and its neighbors. Children born on Epsilon 7 grew up speaking both human languages and the tongues of their alien neighbors, learning from each other and dreaming of a galaxy without war. Jace thought often about those early days when survival had meant hiding, when victory had been a miracle fought in 7 desperate minutes. The memory of the invasion, the shock, the fear, and then the fierce fight back, was seared into his mind. But so was the image of the colonists standing together, battered but unbroken, proving that even the weakest could become strong. Mara approached quietly, her footsteps soft on the rocky ground. She stood beside him, looking out over the colony. "We've come a long way," she said, voice filled with warmth and wonder. Jace nodded. "We still have a long way to go." "But the foundation is solid," Mara continued. "This place, these people, they're ready." They talked about the future, the challenges of rebuilding not just the colony, but an entire system torn apart by war. The work was ongoing, resources were still precious, and threats remained, but the spirit of the people was unbreakable. Jace remembered the countless faces of those who had fallen. Their sacrifices were woven into the fabric of the colony's new life. Monuments and memorials honored their bravery, stories were told and retold, and the lessons of the past guided every decision. In the years since the war, the Coalition had grown. More worlds joined, inspired by Epsilon 7's example. Together they built networks of support, defense, and diplomacy. The galaxy was far from peaceful, but the tides were turning. Jace found himself taking on new roles beyond the battlefield. He became a leader not just in war, but in peace, helping to shape the future of the coalition, mentoring young fighters, and advocating for unity among the diverse species. One afternoon, Jace visited a school where children gathered to learn history, science, and the stories of the Resistance. As he spoke to them, he saw hope reflected in their eyes, a hope born from hardship, but aimed at something greater. Afterward, as he walked through the bustling streets, a young girl ran up to him, clutching a small model spaceship. "Will we fly to the stars someday?" she asked, eyes shining. Jace smiled, lifting her onto his knee. "We already are," he said, "and one day you'll lead us even further." That night, Jace and Mara stood once more on the ridge, watching the twin moons rise. The stars twinkled overhead, silent witnesses to a galaxy forever changed. "We fought hard," Mara said softly, "and we won more than battles." "We won ourselves," Jace replied. "Our place in the stars, our future as the colony below hummed with life." Jace felt a deep peace. The war had been brutal and costly, but it had proven one truth. No matter how weak you seem, if you stand together and refuse to give up, you can change the course of history. The galaxy was vast, the challenges ahead many, but the flame of hope burned brighter than ever. And Earth's weakest colony was now its strongest light. They called it a small skirmish. That's how the Intergalactic Peace Council described it, just a small conflict on the outer edge of the Altheon system. What they didn't say was that the colony on Rivenfall had over 200,000 people. Teachers, miners, scientists, farmers, ordinary humans trying to build something new, something better. Families who believed in peace. Children who were born under a different sky, never even seeing Earth. Now they were all gone. The attackers didn't leave bodies, no survivors, just a smoking crater where homes used to be, and the blackened metal of our flags, torn and shattered. We didn't even get a warning. No declaration, no threat, just silence, and then fire from the skies. At first, Command hesitated. Earth's leaders wanted diplomacy. "We'll investigate," they said. "We'll find out who's responsible." But the people didn't wait. No one wanted to wait. You can't erase a whole colony and expect silence. Not from humanity. Within a week, the outer colonies started mobilizing. Civilian ships were retrofitted for battle. Mining vessels were turned into bombers. Private fleets pledged their loyalty to Earth defense. Retired soldiers came back without even being asked. It wasn't organized at first, but rage doesn't need structure to move. And then came the big announcement: Operation Black Sky. Earth's High Command had one message for the galaxy. Rivenfall will be avenged. They gathered the numbers slowly at first. 50,000 warships from the Terran core fleet. Then another 100,000 from the Martian defense rings. Jupiter's orbital docks brought in heavy dreadnoughts. Luna, Saturn's moons, the Kuiper Belt colonies, even distant Centauri Prime. They all sent fleets. Old ships, new ships, stealth bombers, heavy carriers. In 4 months, Earth had a force that made the stars nervous. 700,000 warships, each one armed, manned, and ready. No politics, no excuses. Just one mission: find who did this and make them pay. I remember the day the skies changed. I was on Callisto, watching the defense grid light up. It wasn't fear. It was something else. The feeling that humanity had finally stopped waiting to be stepped on. No more peace talks with people who think peace is weakness. No more tolerance for arrogance from empires that saw us as bugs. They called us backward once, primitive, a species barely crawling off its cradle world. They said we were too emotional, too violent, too unpredictable. Well, now they were about to see what that really meant. The fleet launched in phases. First wave, recon fleets and scout drones. Second wave, battle groups and intercept carriers. Third wave, full assault armadas with enough firepower to make moons crack. But it wasn't just about the numbers. It was about intent. Humanity didn't want a war. They wanted justice. And if justice needed to be carved into the bones of a dozen alien empires, then so be it. One admiral said it best. We came in peace. Now we come with purpose. The galaxy began to panic. Broadcasts changed overnight. Empires that once ignored Earth started issuing formal statements. Pleas for peace, offers to negotiate, threats disguised as warnings, but no one listened anymore. Because Rivenfall still burned in our minds. Every ship in that 700,000 knew the name. It was written on the hulls, carved into cockpits, burned into the hearts of every pilot and soldier. And as they left Earth's orbit, moving in perfect silence across the void, only one truth remained. One colony fell. Now 700,000 warships move without mercy. The fleet moved like a shadow spreading across the stars, cold, steady, and unstoppable. There was no music, no cheering, just the quiet hum of engines and the cold stare of soldiers who knew what they were going to do. It wasn't revenge for them. It was duty. Someone had made a decision to wipe out Rivenfall. And now, humanity had made a decision in return. Every ship had a name. Some named after lost cities, others after heroes who died without making the history books. My ship was called the Vengeance of Alba. It was a mid-range assault cruiser, nothing fancy, but it had teeth. I was second in command under Captain DeSalle, a woman who never smiled. She was born on Europa and lost her sister in the Rivenfall attack. She didn't talk about it, didn't have to. You could feel it in her silence. When you're part of a fleet that size, 700,000 ships, you'd think you'd feel small, insignificant. But that's not how it felt. It felt like being part of a storm. Like each one of us was a lightning bolt, and the sky was about to break open. The first confirmed target came 3 weeks into the mission. The Nargath Syndicate. They were a minor empire in galactic terms, not big enough to challenge the Council, but not small enough to be ignored. They had a reputation. Smugglers, mercs, slavers. Most of their operations ran through quiet sectors, far from law and justice. That made them bold, arrogant, sloppy. A few of their transmission records were intercepted after Rivenfall, and those logs made one thing clear. They were involved. Maybe not directly, maybe not the only ones, but they supplied the weapons used to turn Rivenfall into ashes. That was enough. The Council hesitated. Again. Let's verify the information, they said. Let's not jump to conclusions. But Earth didn't wait for the Council anymore. They weren't gods. They weren't guardians. They were politicians in robes, afraid of blood on their hands. But we had already drowned in it. So the order came in. Strike the Nargath. Total disablement. No survivors among command. They had 3 primary worlds and 7 outposts. In a normal war, we'd hit the outer rim first. We'd measure resistance, feel them out. But this wasn't a normal war. This wasn't about posturing. This was a message. We hit their capital first. I'll never forget the silence before the first strike. Every comm was muted, every screen dimmed. We floated just beyond their planetary detection range, cloaked by stealth tech we'd only used in Black Ops. I remember standing on the bridge of the Alba, looking at the curve of their world on the screen. Green atmosphere, blue oceans, beautiful even. Peaceful, if you didn't know better. But underneath that surface, weapons factories, slave camps, shipyards building the same kind of weapons that melted Rivenfall to glass. We didn't blink. At 0400 Standard Terran time, the first bombardment began. It started with a kinetic strike, rods of tungsten fired from orbit, each one dropping like a silent god of death. No explosions at first, just impact. The atmosphere itself screamed. Then came the railguns. Ships lined up like chess pieces, firing in waves. Every energy blast tore through defense platforms, ripped apart their orbital security like it was paper. Their satellites fried. Their comms died. And then we moved in. Boarding crews hit command ships. No negotiations, no prisoners, just evidence. We weren't monsters. We still believed in truth. But that truth had to be earned, and sometimes it came out of blood. I led the third boarding party onto the Nargath flagship, Kor Tazal. Big beast of a ship, covered in rust-colored armor and decorated with trophies. Bones, skulls, metal plates etched with names of dead enemies. It wasn't just a warship. It was a statement. And that made us furious. We went in hard, cutting through bulkheads, breaching the central deck, clearing every room with method and fury. The Nargath were tough, I'll give them that. 9 feet tall, all muscle and hate. But they didn't know us. Not really. They'd fought humans before, but not like this. Not with fire in our lungs and ghosts at our backs. When we reached the command throne, their warlord stood waiting. His armor was blood red, his eyes full of smug pride. Until he saw the insignia on our shoulders. The black star, the Rivenfall sigil. He flinched. He tried to speak, some nonsense about misunderstanding, about business, but DeSalle didn't let him finish. She walked up, looked him in the eye, and said just one thing. "Say the name." He didn't, so she pulled the trigger. That day Nargath Prime fell. The rest of their empire cracked in days. Outposts fled, commanders abandoned posts. Some begged for mercy, some tried to fight. None succeeded. Every broadcast from their collapsing empire was filled with the same question. Why is Earth doing this? As if they didn't already know. The footage of Rivenfall was broadcast again. This time, across every channel in the known systems. The crater, the ash fields, the charred bones, the school walls still standing, melted from the outside in. We didn't speak over the footage. We didn't need to. The galaxy watched in silence. But the Nargath were just the beginning. Just one piece in the puzzle. Because the data we recovered from their command ship had names, locations, transactions. Turns out the weapons used on Rivenfall weren't just Nargath tech. They were manufactured under license from the Zarn Dominion, another empire hiding behind neutrality and trade agreements. The Zarn were old, rich, connected. They supplied to everyone, council allies, pirates, even the peacekeeping force. Always smiling, always clean. But blood money smells the same, no matter how pretty the words. And we had names now. Logs, signatures, shipment trails. Captain DeSalle stood on the bridge that night, staring at the map of the next targets. She turned to us, her voice low and steady. The galaxy thought we were weak. Let's remind them what it means to be human. And just like that, the next wave launched. Ships split from the main fleet, moving like claws in the dark. Stealth teams hunted the traitors in the trade guilds. Diplomats were exposed. Bankers arrested. Corrupt council members quietly disappeared. This wasn't just war, it was purging. Humanity wasn't asking for a seat at the galactic table anymore. We were flipping the table. And for the first time in thousands of years, the stars themselves were afraid. We started hearing it in whispers, in intercepted transmissions, from smugglers, spies, even high-ranking council members. The humans are coming. Not the Earth government, not the Terran Union, the humans, as if they finally realized what we really were. We weren't unified by a king or a planet. We were unified by memory, pain, justice. We didn't care if it took 100 years or 1,000 systems. We would find every hand that signed off on Rivenfall, and we'd cut it off. One by one. The word spread like smoke in a dry wind. By the time Earth's fleets reached the Zarn Dominion, the stars already whispered about us. Not in political meetings or quiet diplomacy sessions. No, it was in the underworld corridors, in late-night trader transmissions, in the frightened murmurs of planetary governors who never thought they'd see Earth rise like this. They stopped calling us humans. They called us the Black Sky. Because when the fleet moved in, that's all they saw above. Hundreds of thousands of black-armored ships blotting out their suns, their moons, their hopes. Every shadow in the sky became a symbol of what they feared most, a species that stopped asking for permission. The Zarn tried to do what any guilty power does when cornered. They denied everything. First, they blamed pirates. Then, rogue factories. Then, unauthorized third-party brokers. But Earth's intelligence teams had the receipts, signed trade agreements, encrypted comm logs, personal logs from Zarn ministers laughing about the fools of Rivenfall and how easily one colony could be erased. They didn't know those logs had survived. They didn't know that when the attack began, a single data buoy had launched itself deep into orbit, sending out encrypted packets every 10 seconds. One buoy, one miracle. That's all it took. When the first Earth warships appeared near Zarn space, the Dominion thought we'd negotiate. But we'd already tried that, for centuries. We sent them one message. It wasn't long. Just 2 words. We remember. Then came the fire. If the assault on the Nargath was a swift military strike, the Zarn campaign was different. It was surgical. We didn't just bomb their planets. We cracked their systems. Their banks collapsed first. Every Zarn credit tied to Earth or Terran-aligned colonies was frozen or wiped. Trade partners turned ghost. Entire corporations vanished overnight. The Dominion's economy screamed before a single missile dropped. And then the real storm came. Their outer defense rings were cut apart like old vines. The Zarn Navy tried to put up a show of strength, but their ships were built for intimidation, not war. They were covered in gold, encrusted in light displays, and bloated with decorative armor. They burned like kindling. I was there, aboard the ISS Dagger Point, part of Strike Wing Vulture. We weren't even in the first wave, just cleanup. But cleanup meant dealing with the escape ships. And that was worse in some ways. These weren't soldiers, they were nobles, bankers, CEO families, fleeing in yachts, cruise vessels, personal luxury transports. Some of those ships were bigger than our dreadnoughts, but not because of weapons, because of theaters, spas, gardens, whole levels designed just for comfort. We caught one ship trying to run through a mining corridor near Orion's Veil, the Golden Prism. I'll never forget that name. It came up on our radar, emitting civilian codes. The captain called for mercy, said they had children on board, diplomats, people of importance. We boarded, careful, cautious. And what we found? They weren't diplomats, they were celebrating, drinking champagne, eating exotic food, laughing about the human tantrum like it was a joke. Like Rivenfall was just a bump in the road, like we were dogs barking too loud. One of them, I still remember his face, stood up, glass in hand, and said, "If we knew killing one colony would get you this angry, we'd have done it sooner." He didn't get to say anything else. We didn't kill them. That would have been too easy. We recorded them. Every word, every laugh, every mocking comment, sent the footage to the council, to the Zarn people, to the universe, let them see what their leaders really thought of peace. The reaction was immediate. Protests broke out across the Dominion, not just fear, shame, people demanding answers, demanding arrests. and when none came, they took matters into their own hands. Within 2 weeks, Zarn's own citizens overthrew the Central Council. Some say Earth helped. Maybe. Maybe not. But here's what we did do. We left, didn't nuke their cities, didn't occupy. We took their corrupted leaders, exposed the crimes, and left the people to clean their own house. It wasn't mercy, it was restraint. And that scared them more than fire ever could. Because now they knew humanity wasn't just mad. We were measured. We didn't want to burn the galaxy. We wanted to fix it. And if that meant cutting out the rot piece by piece, we'd do it without flinching. Other systems started shifting, fast. The Tirash Accord, once proud allies of the Nargath, suddenly disavowed all support. Their ambassador offered Earth a formal apology, not because they cared, because they didn't want to be next. The Velari cluster, which once blocked Earth from trade routes, quietly opened their borders. And the Kreth Combine, a race of warriors who once mocked humans as soft meat, signed a non-aggression pact without being asked. The galaxy was changing, not because we asked, but because they finally listened. But not everyone was ready to kneel, because deep beyond the edge of mapped space, something else was stirring. The Karnathi Expanse, a hidden empire, ancient, silent. For centuries they stayed out of politics, hiding behind their black nebulae and distortion fields. No one knew how big they were, or how dangerous. Now, we had a reason to care. Because the last recovered log from Rivenfall, a blurry, corrupted visual, showed a symbol, just for a second, burned onto the side of a dropship. A spiral of blades around a black star. That symbol matched Karnathi war markings seen during the Blood Singularity conflicts over 400 years ago. Conflicts that were never officially documented. Because anyone who saw a Karnathi fleet back then didn't survive. The realization hit like ice. The ones who destroyed Rivenfall, the ones who turned children into shadows and left nothing but whispers. They weren't just pirates or arms dealers. They were something older, and they were watching, waiting, and now they knew we were coming. But so did we. Back aboard the Dagger Point, Captain Renna summoned the senior staff. She stood at the war table, red lights flickering across her face, and said, "This isn't over. It never was. Rivenfall was just the match. We're in a fire now. And the next enemy? They're not scared. Yet." She looked around the room. Pilots, engineers, tacticians, all of us hardened by what we'd seen. Then she said, "They wanted to wake the sleeping beast? Fine. Let them see what happens when Earth truly awakens." The Karnathi Expanse wasn't on most star maps, not because people hadn't tried, but because ships that went in didn't come back. Even before Rivenfall, it was considered dead space, quiet, cold, and cursed, a place of black nebulae, drifting debris fields, and gravity wells that bent light like mirrors. Stories said it was haunted. Generations of pilots whispered about signals that screamed with no source, ships that vanished mid-transmission, strange lights that followed from behind but never showed up on radar. Now we knew those stories weren't myths, they were warnings. When we got orders to enter the Expanse, the room went quiet. Not the scared kind of quiet, just the kind where everyone starts thinking a little deeper. Like you're standing at the edge of a cliff and someone just told you to jump, not because you have a choice, but because something on the other side needs to be stopped. Our orders were clear. Find the Karnathi, confirm their involvement in Rivenfall, eliminate their command structure. There were no politics anymore, no questions about treaties or council permission. After what we'd seen, the massacres, the arrogance, the utter lack of remorse, humanity wasn't waiting for invitations. We entered the Expanse with a task force of 12,000 ships, just a fraction of the full fleet, but every one of them hand-picked, stealth cruisers, long-range recon units, electronic warfare carriers, Black Ops dreadnoughts. The kind of ships Earth never admitted existed. Our ship, the Dagger Point, was one of the lead vanguards. We were equipped with multi-spectrum cloaks, radiation dampeners, and a crew that didn't flinch. Captain Renna briefed us before the jump. "This isn't a war zone," she said, voice low. "It's a graveyard. Treat it that way. Assume every flicker on your sensors is a trap. Don't chase ghosts. Don't get curious. Stay focused. Stay alive." We dropped into the expanse just past the starless border, where light itself looked thinner. And I swear, the silence hit instantly. Not just the absence of sound, but the absence of everything. No comm chatter from nearby ships, no background radiation, no drifting signal noise, just cold space and shadows that seemed to move when you weren't looking. The first thing we saw was a wreck, a massive cargo ship, non-human in design, split clean down the middle and drifting through a field of black dust. Its hull had deep claw-like gouges, as if something ripped it open from the inside. There were no signs of life, no power, no distress signals. We scanned it anyway. Inside, the only thing still running was a repeating message. Short, broken, scrambled from damage, but we pieced it together. "They see what you fear." That was it. Over and over. It should have sounded like nonsense, but it didn't. Not in that place. A week into the expanse, our crew started to change. Not visibly, not right away, but you could feel it. People stopped talking as much. Laughter disappeared. Even the jokes in the mess hall started sounding flat and empty. One of our engineers, Harlan, began having nightmares. Woke up screaming in the middle of the night. Said he saw faces looking back from his diagnostic screens. When we checked the logs, no faces, just static. 2 days later, he walked into the airlock and tried to vent himself into space. He was stopped, restrained, and sedated. But his last words? They whispered Rivenfall. The doctors tried to explain it. Stress, long hours, deep space paranoia. They said it was normal, part of the job. But even the medical officer looked like he didn't believe himself. The truth. The Karnathi weren't just hiding in the expanse. They were watching. They didn't need scouts. They didn't need radar. They had systems here. Biological networks, we learned later. Organic listening posts hidden in asteroid fields, pulsing with neural signals instead of radio waves. Ships weren't just being tracked. They were being read. We were being studied the second we entered their domain. And we made our first mistake on day 13. One of our long-range scouts, Vortex Echo, picked up what looked like a distress beacon, a Terran signature, decades old, from a missing science vessel lost over 40 years ago. It shouldn't have been here. We argued about it. Half the command staff said it was bait. The other half said if there were survivors, we owed it to them. In the end, the captain made the call. We sent in 2 destroyers and a recovery team. They landed on what looked like a shattered moon, a dead rock surrounded by metal debris. The beacon was real. We traced it to a broken hull, half buried in rock, like it had crash-landed. The team entered the remains of the science ship. What they found inside, it was human. Or it used to be. Bodies frozen in place, mouths open in screams. Some had clearly tried to claw their way out. But others had symbols etched into their skin, not written, carved, carefully, like someone had taken their time. Some were missing organs, removed cleanly, no signs of struggle, not harvested, studied. There were no logs left, no data, only a message scrawled on the main console in dried blood. We never left. That's when the ambush hit. A Karnathi warship, black as obsidian, uncloaked less than 30,000 kilometers from our task force. No warning, no engine flare. Just there. It didn't fire. It didn't move. It just sat in space, staring. And then every ship in our fleet received the same transmission. Not audio, not video. A feeling. A sharp pressure in the back of the skull. A cold wave behind the eyes. And then images, flashes, rivenfall, burning. But from above, from orbit, seen through alien eyes. They were showing us what they had done. They were proud. And then a voice, in a language we didn't recognize, but somehow understood. You reached too far. This galaxy was never yours. Then the ship vanished, folded into a crack of space like it had never existed. We tried to pursue, tracked the jump vector. Nothing. Just black. The fleet regrouped, angry, unsettled, but more determined than ever. Because now we weren't just looking for confirmation. We were hunting monsters. And worse, we had proof. Rivenfall wasn't random. It wasn't just about intimidation or power. It was a message from the Carnathi. Earth was rising too fast, spreading, touching sectors they considered sacred. So they made an example of us. And they did it deliberately. They thought we'd whimper, collapse, hide. Instead, we brought 700,000 warships into the void, and we weren't leaving without a reckoning. After the Carnathi ship disappeared, everything changed. We weren't just soldiers anymore. We were witnesses. And the thing we witnessed wasn't war. It was something colder, older, something that had been waiting in the dark while the rest of the galaxy played politics. The command on Earth didn't waste time. As soon as they received the logs from the Expanse, the images, the psychic transmission, the mutilated science team, they activated Protocol Ashfall. It wasn't public. Most people had never even heard the name. It was a contingency created long ago for something humanity hoped would never be real. A hostile, hidden species capable of psychological warfare and long-term manipulation across the galaxy. The Carnathi weren't just invaders. They were engineers of fear. Our orders changed. We were no longer just tasked with engaging targets. Now, we were to find their home system, their central hive, their control point. Whatever place was giving the orders, whatever shadow kept pulling the strings, we were to find it and destroy it. They wanted to erase us from memory. Now we were going to erase them from history. The first step? Follow the path of the destroyed. In old archives from forgotten colonies, we found a pattern. Places that had mysteriously gone silent over the last few hundred years. No official wars, no rebellions, just dead zones. Entire systems marked as uninhabitable, then left alone. There were 17 of them. All around the Expanse, it was a ring, a perimeter. The Carnathi had been building a noose. Every time a civilization got too close to their edge, it vanished. Quietly, discreetly, controlled extinction, enough to avoid suspicion, enough to avoid attention. Until Rivenfall. And the difference between the others and us? We fought back. We started with System 9 Red, codenamed Whale Spire, once a Terran research outpost, wiped clean 82 years ago. Now it was just rocks and clouds, or so we thought. The moment our recon drones entered the system, they went blind. No signal, no return, just vanished. But we didn't lose them to weapons or jammers. We lost them to silence, not quiet, not peaceful. Silence like a scream with no air behind it. Captain Rena decided to lead the fleet in personally. She brought in the Dagger Point, 3 escort destroyers, and a recon carrier with AI-assisted scanners. What we found? It was a graveyard. Dozens of ships. All kinds. Terran, Zarn, Nargath, even a few Council-linked models. All dead, floating, drifting like bones in space. Some had holes melted through the center. Others were fused together, literally merged, metal twisted like wet clay. We found bodies, too. Human bodies. But not rotted. Preserved, as if something had frozen them the second they died. Their faces stuck in expressions of terror. No sign of radiation, no heat damage. Just emptiness. It didn't make sense. There was no weapon on record that did this. No tech that precise. No logic to the carnage. But then our long-range scanners picked up something behind the third moon of Whalespire 4. It wasn't a ship. It was a station. Organic in shape, half buried in the rock like a tumor. Black and pulsing faintly, as if breathing. It had no engines, no visible weapons, but its surface emitted low-frequency waves that made our skin crawl. We scanned it. Nothing came back. Then we pinged it, just once. And that was enough. The entire station came alive. Tendrils of black metal uncoiled from the surface. Eyes opened. Actual eyes, grown from tissue and tech. They blinked in unison, all aimed at us. Then a signal hit our ship. No message, no voice, just images. But not like before. Not shared memories. These were personal, private. Each crew member saw something different. I saw my brother, who died back on Europa Station. He was standing in the control room, face calm, eyes hollow. He said my name, then bled from his mouth until his skin cracked like stone. Another crew member collapsed, sobbing. She saw her mother's funeral, played backward. One pilot screamed that he saw himself floating outside the ship, frozen, watching the rest of us from beyond. It wasn't just fear. It was surgical emotional targeting. The station was alive, and it was inside our heads. Captain Renna ordered a full retreat from the moon's orbit. But it was too late. 2 of our destroyers stopped responding. They didn't explode. They just powered down. Drifted away like they'd forgotten what movement meant. No signs of attack. Just sudden emptiness. We tried to retrieve them, but something in that moon. It bent space around itself. Our tethers wouldn't reach. Our navigation readings began looping, like we weren't in real space anymore. Then a new ship appeared. Not from warp, not from behind a planet. Just there. A Carnathi battleship. Bigger than anything we'd ever seen. Twice the size of our heaviest carriers. Its hull looked grown, not built. Sections breathing like lungs, ribs visible along its spine. No engines, no weapons, just presence. And behind it, dozens more, uncloaking one by one, silent, watching. We should have been terrified. But something happened in that moment. The dagger point didn't run. We fired the first shot. A precision rail round straight into the belly of the Carnathi flagship. And to everyone's shock, it ripped through, no shields, no countermeasures. It tore open the hull, and the ship screamed. Not metal groaning, a real scream, like a wounded animal howling through space. The sound cut through our comms like a blade. But we didn't stop. All ships opened fire. Laser storms, missile barrages, kinetic rounds, everything we had. And for once, the Carnathi bled. 2 of their ships shattered. One broke apart and disintegrated into dust. Whatever they were, however ancient or powerful, they weren't gods. They could be killed. The message was clear. We weren't the ones trapped in the expanse anymore. They were. And Earth had just found the crack in their armor. The dagger point led the fleet back to high orbit, regrouping with the others. Damage was minimal. Losses were light. But morale? Morale was a supernova, because now we knew the truth. The Carnathi could hide behind their mind tricks, their silence, their whispers and illusions. But when it came to real fire, real war, real pain, they weren't ready for us. Captain Renna sent a message back to Earth, short, like all the best ones. We found the nest. We can burn it. The Carnathi made one mistake. They let us hurt them. It didn't matter that it was just one ship, one scream, one crack in the shadows. They bled, and we saw it. That changed everything. Word traveled fast. Every fleet still stationed near the expanse received the same message from Captain Renna. Carnathi forces vulnerable to sustained kinetic and plasma barrages. Proceed with strike-level aggression. No quarter. It was the green light everyone had been waiting for. Earth's command didn't hesitate. The full fleet, 700,000 ships, began shifting position. The armadas spread across systems slowly reoriented their engines. What had once been quiet, orbiting formations turned toward one singular direction, the heart of the expanse. No more scouting. No more watching. This was the march. The first step was building a corridor through the black nebulae, something the galaxy had never done. The expanse was infamous for destroying sensors and folding spatial maps, making long-range navigation almost impossible. Ships would get lost in gravitational eddies or turn in circles without realizing it. But now? Earth wasn't just bringing firepower. We brought calculation. Every ship along the edge of the expanse was ordered to begin mapping. Our AI networks worked in tandem. Quantum cores, deep space drones, gravitational sonar, it all came together to build a model of the void. We called it the thread. A narrow, twisted path through the chaos. It looked more like a vine than a road. Bending, wrapping, sometimes dipping through folds of space that made your head spin. It was barely wide enough for a cruiser. We sent the first vanguard, 300 ships, small, fast, deadly. Our mission? Clear the way for the full fleet. I was still aboard the Dagger Point, now promoted to squadron leader. Our crew had grown colder. Not in a bad way. We were focused, sharper, like blades freshly whetted on stone. Everyone knew what was coming. We weren't here to survive. We were here to finish. As we moved deeper through the thread, we passed things I still don't have words for. Dead stars that hummed. Gas clouds that screamed when you scanned them. One asteroid that pulsed like a beating heart, dripping red ice into the void. The Karnathi hadn't just made this place a trap, they shaped it, twisted the laws of physics with biotech and gravity folding. This was their nest, and it hated light. But we kept going. 2 days in, we reached Vekshara, a Karnathi fortress moon. It wasn't a base in the traditional sense. It was a hollow moon, half covered in black chitin, with glowing veins of green biolight running along the surface. It rotated slowly, surrounded by floating chunks of stone tethered by energy bridges. Their ships docked like insects to a hive, legs locked into sockets that pulsed with heat. It was beautiful. And we were going to destroy it. The order was simple. Take it offline. Permanently. No diplomacy, no warning. We opened with a triple barrage from our heaviest kinetic platforms. Solid metal rods, massed at hypersonic speeds, slammed into the outer shell. The surface cracked, then buckled. Chitin peeled away like shattered bark. Their defenses activated fast. Flesh cannons that shot acidic energy bolts, mines that hissed across space, spore clouds that tried to cling to our hulls and eat through armor. But we adapted faster. Laser walls fried the spores mid-flight. Shield oscillators deflected acid. And for every Karnathi weapon that emerged, we responded with something crueler. Because here's the thing. Humans aren't just warriors. We're learners. You hit us once, we build a counter. You try again, we improve it. You push harder, we break you. Within 15 minutes, the fortress was in flames. Chunks of molten debris floated in orbit. Their ships tried to flee, but they had nowhere to go. The vanguard caught them, pulled them back with tractor snares, and burned them into silence. We found their command node deep in the core of the fortress, a sphere. Alive. It pulsed when we entered, sent out waves that made our ears bleed and our vision blur. Then it spoke, not in words, in emotion, regret. No, not regret. Disgust. As if it couldn't believe we'd made it this far, as if we were unworthy of even being hated. It tried to manipulate us again. We all felt it. Visions of Rivenfall, of the screams, of people we lost. It thought it could break us. But this time, we smiled. We let the AI core burn it with precision lasers until it stopped pulsing. That was the end of Vekshara, the first Karnathi stronghold in the expanse. Gone. And once we lit that fire, the rest of the galaxy watched. Even the Council, those pompous diplomats who once ignored Earth, issued a statement. We advise all empires to support Earth's efforts in containing the Karnathi threat. Contain? That wasn't the plan. We weren't here to contain. We were here to finish what they started. With the path cleared, the rest of the fleet began to arrive. Massive carriers, orbital bombardment ships, dreadnoughts that looked more like floating cities than vessels. They came in waves, each one adding more pressure to the Karnathi's thin line of defense. And still, they didn't speak. No messages, no parley. Just fear. You could feel it in the way they fought. Erratic, desperate. The elegance we'd seen before was gone. They knew the tide had turned. Our scientists began studying the remains. What they found was horrifying. The Karnathi weren't a species in the traditional sense. They were a design, a biological program, grown over eons, blending organic and machine, controlled by a central will. Not a king, not an emperor, a hive mind. And Rivenfall, that wasn't just destruction, it was a ritual. They fed on pain, on memory, on legacy. They erased civilizations not just to eliminate threats, but to consume identity. Make sure no one remembered them. Make sure no name echoed after the fire. But Earth had changed the rules. We didn't die quietly. We roared. And now, we were at their gates. Captain Rena stood before the entire fleet during the final briefing. Her image flickered on every screen, from small corvette bridges to massive dreadnought halls. She didn't shout. She didn't wave flags. She just said, "They thought Rivenfall would be forgotten. Let's make sure the only thing forgotten is them." The next step? The core. The Karnathi homeworld. We had coordinates. We had a fleet. And for the first time in history, they had fear. The Karnathi homeworld was nothing like we expected. We thought it would be a fortress, a dark throne surrounded by weapons and death. Instead, it was a shadow, a cold, quiet place that seemed almost abandoned. From orbit, it looked like a black marble, smooth and cracked, with faint green veins running across its surface like scars. No atmosphere we could detect, no signs of life on scanners. The entire planet was dead, or so it seemed. But we knew better. This was their heart, their core, the source of everything we'd faced. As the fleet formed into assault formations, the tension was nearly unbearable. Every ship held its breath. Every pilot felt the weight of thousands of lives on their shoulders. The ghosts of Rivenfall rode with us. Captain Rena addressed the fleet one last time. "Today we fight not just for Earth, or for the colonies lost. We fight for every soul they tried to erase, every name they sought to silence. This ends now. We had one shot, one chance. The plan was brutal but precise. First, a wave of electronic warfare ships would launch a massive EMP barrage designed to disable the Karnathi's biological tech and communications. Then, the kinetic bombardment, tens of thousands of rods dropping like comets, striking the surface with enough force to crack the planet's crust. Finally, the ground forces, human special operations teams, drop pods, and drones designed for one purpose: destroy the hive mind itself. As the EMP began, silence fell. No signals, no responses. The planet's surface flickered, shadows dancing in the electromagnetic storm. Then the rods started to fall. The bombardment was terrifying to watch. Each impact sent shockwaves through the planet, rippling like a pulse across the fleet's sensor grids. For hours, the sky above the Karnathi world was a rain of fire. But then the unexpected happened. The planet fought back. Beneath the surface, deep within the cracks, massive structures began to rise, organic towers, like spires of black glass, glowing with sickly green light. The hive was alive. It was waking. From the depths came swarms of creatures, half machine, half insect, all deadly. They flooded the orbit, cutting through ships with lethal precision. The battle erupted. Our fleet was caught in a storm of death and bioplasma fire. Cruisers exploded, carrier decks burned, pilots screamed over comms. But we held, because we knew what was at stake. Amid the chaos, the Dagger Point launched its strike teams. Drop pods pierced the atmosphere, hurtling toward the glowing towers. On the ground, it was worse than any horror story. The Carnathi creatures moved like shadows, silent, swift, merciless. They didn't just fight, they absorbed. They consumed technology and flesh alike, growing stronger with every kill. Our teams pushed forward, breaking through defenses with plasma cutters and pulse rifles. The hive mind's control node was buried deep beneath the largest tower. We fought through twisted corridors, walls alive with pulsing veins and chittering sounds. When we reached the core chamber, we found it. A massive pulsating orb, suspended in mid-air, surrounded by tendrils of black biometal. It was the brain of the Carnathi hive. It pulsed with a terrifying intelligence. Our lead operative, Lieutenant Cara Dune, approached with a device designed to disrupt its neural patterns. As she activated it, the hive screamed, a psychic roar that rattled the minds of everyone on the planet. Towers shook, creatures wailed. The hive began to collapse. Above, the fleet intensified its fire. We poured everything into the planet, missiles, plasma, kinetic rounds, until finally the core shattered. A blinding flash engulfed the planet. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, the planet began to break apart. Tectonic plates ruptured. Volcanoes erupted with bioplasma fire. The black spires shattered into dust. The hive was dead. The Carnathi Empire was no more. As the shockwave rippled through space, the fleet withdrew. We were battered. We were broken. But we were victorious. Captain Rena's final message was simple. We came for justice. We leave with peace. The stars that had once been dark with Carnathi shadows now held a new light. The galaxy was safe, for now. But as we left the expanse behind, I looked back at the burning planet. And I wondered, what other shadows waited in the dark? The Carnathi were gone. Their black world shattered into drifting fragments, scattered like forgotten nightmares across the void. We had won. But victory wasn't quiet. It wasn't a moment of celebration or peace. It was a heavy silence. A silence filled with loss, with memories, with questions no one dared ask. As the fleet regrouped and prepared to head home, I stood on the bridge of the Dagger Point, watching the remnants of the Carnathi world slowly cool in the distance. The stars felt different now. Darker, heavier, because we had paid a price. Thousands of ships lost, countless brave souls burned away in the storm of war, and yet even in that darkness there was something else. A faint glimmer. Hope. Captain Rena gathered us all for a final briefing before the fleet dispersed. She spoke with that calm, steady voice that never broke, even when the universe was falling apart around us. This was never just about revenge, she said. It was about survival, about proving that humanity will not be erased without a fight. Her words echoed across the channels, heard by every ship, every crew. She reminded us that the galaxy was watching. Not just enemies, but friends, allies, those who once doubted our place among the stars. We showed them who we are, she said. Not just fighters, but survivors. Guardians, the ones who carry the flame of hope in the darkest night. As the fleet broke formation and began their journeys home, the weight of what we'd done settled on everyone. I thought about Rivenfall, the colony that started this war, the families who never came back, the children who never grew up. We'd brought justice, yes. But justice didn't bring them back. It never would. But what it did do was send a message to every corner of the galaxy. We remember. We remember because we are human, because we carry the pain of loss like a shield, because we fight not just with weapons, but with our hearts. As months passed, the political landscape shifted. The Council reformed, humbled by the scale of Earth's power and resolve. New treaties were forged, not from weakness, but from respect. Humanity was no longer a curiosity or an annoyance. We were a force, a storm. And as the fleet returned to their home systems, new opportunities opened. Trade routes once closed were now gateways. Old enemies became cautious allies. And a new chapter began. Back on Earth, life continued, scarred, changed, but alive. Families rebuilt. Children learned about the stars, about the wars fought in their names. And somewhere deep in the archives, the story of 700,000 warships moving as one became legend. A legend of fire and fury, of darkness met with light, of a species that refused to be forgotten. Because in the end, that's what it means to be human, to fight, to endure, to shine. The stars await, and so do we.